Hey everybody, and welcome to Chapter 3 of Econ1002. This chapter is going to span a couple of weeks, although I am going to go over the entire chapter in a single review video. So this review will cover both weeks 3 and weeks 4, and we're going to be talking about the entire model of supply and demand. So this is, again, supplementary to the textbook information, and I do encourage everybody to use the drop-in sessions, especially with this particular chapter. The supply and demand model is very foundational to everything that we're going to learn from here out. So having a very good understanding of this material is just really going to benefit you as we move through all of the additional chapters, because this is what we are going to be building on, is supply and demand. So as an overview, what we'll do is we'll break this down into 4 components. We'll first look at the demand side of the marketplace as a force, and then we will consider also the supply side of the market. So we're going to look at these separately. And then what we'll do is bring the supply and demand forces together and look at how the market works to create what we call an equilibrium. And this equilibrium is what allows us to understand what the price of a good or a service should be, and understand what quantity of resources we're going to allocate for that particular good or service. From there, we'll take it even one step further, and we'll look at the model in kind of a dynamic way where demand and supply are shifting as we go, and we see changes in market price and changes in the allocation of resources. So all of that will make a little bit more sense as we go through. But as a starting point, just a reach back to last week's material, we talked about the circular flow model, and we looked at how the circular flow model use supply and demand, noted here, as this kind of intermediary between the financial flow and the resources flow of the final goods and services. So we see goods and services flowing to households, and then we see the households paying for those goods and services. And the interaction is occurring in this supply and demand model. This is true also on the resources side when households are selling those factors of production to the firms. The resources are supplied to the firm, and then the firm in turn pays for those resources through rents, interest, profit, and wages. And those are negotiated as well through the forces of supply and demand. So we can embed the supply and demand model into this circular flow model and see it as a mechanism. It's like a tool that's working within our economy to do all of those allocations that we were talking about. So here's how we decide sort of who gets what and how much of this to make, and so on and so on. So if we start on the demand side of the market, the first thing that we want to do is define what demand is. Demand, obviously, most of us know that it's us. We want to purchase something, so we have a demand for it. There's a certain amount of demand for the Tesla Cybertruck, right? And when we talk about demand as a definition, there are 2 things that have to be true for demand to exist. We have to want to make the purchase. That's the first thing. The purchase has to meet some need or meet some want that we have, and we are willing. Like, this is something that we are voluntarily wanting to enter into as a transaction. But even that desire isn't enough to create demand. If I just want something, it just means that I want it. There's lots of things that I want that I can't necessarily afford. And I also have to have the ability to purchase a good or a service or a resource in order to truly have demand. So in terms of willingness, maybe I want a mega yacht, and I want a Lamborghini Countach, and I want a 20-bedroom mansion in Beverly Hills, and it's fine to want all those things. But if I don't have the ability to purchase them, then I'm not in the market, right? I'm not supplying any force of demand. I just want those things. And similarly, when it comes to ability to purchase, there's lots of things that I can afford. And I think of canned meat from the dollar store as something that I could easily pay for, but I just don't want it. So therefore, also I am not in the market. So there is no demand coming from me for either a mega yacht or dollar store spam. I'm just not in either of those markets. But there are things I do want and have the ability to purchase. A good example might be Tim Hortons coffee, which we'll kind of get into in a moment. So, if we define demand as being this willingness and ability to pay, we also think that there are differences in the quantity that I'm going to be demanding depending on the price of a good. So, if a good is more expensive, maybe I would have a lower quantity demanded, or if something was cheaper, I'd have a higher quantity demanded. Um, let's put that in perspective. Here's something that I have demand for. Tim Hortons coffee is something that I am willing to buy. It is something that I have the ability to buy. And in fact, I do buy Tim Hortons coffee. So here is what we call a demand schedule. And this is just kind of the raw data of my willingness and ability to purchase different quantities at different amounts. So here's me. I am in the market for coffee. And here is a variety of prices that Tim Hortons might charge for a cup of coffee. Now, I personally have a bit of a limit for myself. I say would like to drink more, but for health reasons and so on, I kind of limit myself to 2 cups of coffee every day. And right now, Tim Hortons coffee is about $2 a cup. And we can see here that when coffee is $2 per cup, my personal quantity demanded is 2 units. And because I have this kind of restriction on myself, even if Tim Hortons lowered the price to $1, then I would still only have a quantity demanded of 2 units. So that's what I would purchase in a day, on a day. If Tim Hortons was having a customer appreciation day, or if they were just giving it away one week, I might break my rule and even have a third cup. If coffee is going to be free, then I'll take that little step and have a third coffee. So my quantity demanded is fluctuating a little bit with the price there. And if Tim Hortons decided to start raising their prices, that might impact my decisions as well. So if coffee is suddenly $3 a cup, then I might cut back a little bit because it's starting to get kind of expensive, right? From what I'm used to paying. Um, and even if they raise the price as high as $4 a cup, I may still justify buying. Now that's getting really pricey. I may still buy the 1 cup a day. I'll reason through it. I'll say, well, I used to spend $4 a day, and now I'm spending $4 a day, or whatever my logic might be. I may still buy a cup of coffee. But if they raise the price as high as $5 a cup, then at that point, I've just said to myself, I'm not willing to make that trade off. That's too much money for a cup of coffee. The marginal cost is increased, and I'm not getting, and the marginal benefit is lower. So I don't make that choice, and now I don't want any coffees. So that's my demand schedule. And then my wife, Tanya, she also drinks coffee. And her demand schedule will look a little bit different. Tanya enjoys 1 cup of coffee per day, and at the current actual price of $2, she will buy a cup of coffee. But she's not quite like me. She doesn't really want more after that. So even if they lower the price to $1, then her personal quantity demanded would not change. She'd still take one. And even if they gave it away for free, she would still just take one. If they raised the price a little bit, she would probably be okay with that and still buy her one coffee. But if it went any higher than $3 for her, she would just say, no, I'm just going to do something else. I'm not buying the Tim Hortons coffee anymore. So at that point and upwards, her quantity demanded is 0. And finally, my friend Jim, big coffee fan. At the current price of $2, he drinks 4 big cups of coffee a day, and he'd probably buy more if it was cheaper. If they drop the price, he'll buy 5. If they're just giving it away, he'll buy 6, right? And he may even pull back a little bit if the price was going up. So at $4, he may just buy a couple of cups a day, and at $5, he'd buy 1 cup a day, but he'd still buy it. So these are our individual preferences. So myself and Tanya and Jim, we're all unique human beings. We all like coffee in a different way, and all of us are willing and able to buy Tim Hortons coffee, but just differently. So if I want to think about the market, then what I'm doing is I'm adding up all of the people in the market and their own personal individual demand schedules. So if we take my demand schedule and Tanya's demand schedule and Jim's demand schedule, we add it all together, we get the market demand schedule. This is the entire side of the market. So at $5 per cup, it looks like I'm not in, Tanya's not in, but Jim will buy 1 cup. So the market demand is 1 unit, right? At $4, that adds up to 3 units. At $3, it adds up to 5, and so on down the line, right? So what we're seeing is a bit of a relationship here too. I can graph this information. I can take this demand schedule and I can create what we call a demand curve. I can create an XY graph with the quantity demanded on the horizontal axes, the x-axis, and the price, the various prices on the y-axis, and I can look at those relationships. So here, for example, if the price is $3, then we know that the total market demand will be 5 units of coffee. So I just correspond my point, doot, 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 and here's 5 units of coffee, doot, 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 and there we go. If it's $4, then the market quantity demanded is 3 units. So $4 corresponds to 3 units, right? And I can just map all of these in this way. Oops, sorry. So I plot all of these points. Here's those different prices, and I just can draw a line through these points as well, and we see a straight line occurring. And this is what we would call a demand curve. And so why am I connecting these points? Well, this is a small market of 3 people, but let's say that each of us, myself, Tanya, and Jim, let's say each of us represented 1 million purchasers, right? So really, this is 1 million units, and this is 3 million units, and so on. So there's going to be these in-between points as well. You know, Tim Hortons could charge $3.25, and we would expect that the quantity demanded would go down a little bit. They could charge, you know, any of these prices in between, and anytime they raised or decreased the the price, we would see an increase or a decrease in the quantity as well. So what we're seeing here is what we call the law of demand. The law of demand says that as price increases, then the quantity demanded will decrease. It's an inverse relationship. We can see it here as price is increasing, right? The quantity demanded is going from 10 units to 1 unit, right? It's decreasing. I know the arrows are facing the same way, but just visualize that the quantity demanded is going down as the price is going up, right? So price is increasing, quantity demanded is decreasing, and vice versa. If the price is going down, then the quantity demanded is going up, right? That's the law of demand. So why is this true? Well, basically because we have choices that we can make. I have only so much money. I have to choose what I'm going to spend it on, and I have a variety of options that I can choose from. I can buy Tim Hortons coffee, but I could also buy other things. I could buy McDonald's coffee or Starbucks coffee. I could make coffee at home. I could purchase tea instead. Because of this substitution effect, if the price of something is going up, then maybe I'll select one of those other options that aren't going to be as expensive. Right? So if Tim Hortons coffee starts to cost $5 a cup, well, it's been good, but now I'm going to buy McDonald's coffee instead, right? So therefore, there's going to be this change, and because expensive things have cost more in trade-offs, then it's just essentially true that as something is cheaper, I am more willing and able to buy more of it, right? And a fairly straightforward concept. As something costs more, it's a greater part of my budget, comes at a higher opportunity cost, and I'm less likely to purchase as many of that good or that service. There's a third concept that the book doesn't really get into, but this demand curve also demonstrates something that we call the law of diminishing marginal utility, which just means you don't need to know that, but what it means is that the more we get of something as quantity is increasing, the value of it to us is decreasing, right? So when you order a pizza, the very first piece of pizza that you eat is the most delicious piece of pizza, right? So um, by the time you get to the 10th piece of pizza, you are not really enjoying it as much. You don't value it as much. And you would not be as willing to pay as much for that 10th slice if you were buying it slice by slice by slice by slice. So, because we value things less as we have more of them, it also means that in order to keep purchasing more of them, then we would need a lower price to offset that trade off, that decision that we're making. So, so here we have the demand curve. It's following the law of demand. Price and quantity are inversely related, and we're just obeying these fundamental principles of scarcity and opportunity cost and trade-offs. So that leads us to our first definition. We have something that we call the change in quantity demanded. And this means that here are all of the different quantities that we would demand at different prices. So if we do change the price from $15 to $10, then that means we'll see a movement along this curve from here to here, right? So another way of looking at it would be if this is the current actual price of Tim Hortons coffee and it's $2, right? Then if Tim Hortons raised the price to $4, then there would be a lower quantity demanded, right? Quantity would decrease, and we would see a movement along this curve. So as price is going up and down, we are moving up and down along this curve with it, and we call it the change in quantity demanded. So this up and down arrow on the price axes corresponds to a movement on the horizontal axes, and on the actual graph, it looks like we're moving along the curve. So this is like, think of it like a lever. If I pull the price lever, then I'm causing a movement to a new position on the curve. And then I raise the price lever again, which causes a new position on the curve. So at any given point in time, the price will be whatever the price is. So there is a set spot that we're at. And if we increase or decrease price, then we just move to a new spot. That's all. So we call this a change in quantity demanded. Now, that's one of the two mechanisms of the force of demand. So we recognize that we have this curve which represents the quantities that would be demanded at different prices, and we recognize that as price changes, we move up and down along that curve. Now, the curve itself may in fact change. It may shift, right? So this is what a demand shift looks like, and what we're saying is that here are these prices, and at one time, this was the demand. This was the willingness and ability to pay different quantities at those prices. But for some reason, something has changed, and now, if the price is $5, it used to be true that we would demand a quantity of 2 units. But now at $5, we demand a quantity of 8 units, right? And this means at $4, our quantity demanded would no longer be 3, it would now be 9. At $3, it's no longer 6, it's now 12, right? We're seeing an increase in demand. People are more willing and more able to buy the good than they were before. So at any of these points, I am just kind of moving over and saying, well, there's a new point now because the demand has increased. There's a shift. And what it looks like if you move all of the points is as if you are taking that curve and just sliding it over to the right, right? So what are some things that can cause shifts in demand? Why would this curve move back and forth, right? Why would demand increase or decrease? And what we do is say, well, there's an infinite number of reasons why people may want something more or less or be able to purchase it more or less. But let's categorize these things. How could we define the reasons that demand increases or decreases? Well, here's 5 determinants of demand. So when the curve is shifting, it's not a price change. A price change would say that we're moving up and down along a curve. Here, the curve is shifting. So maybe I would be more willing and able to buy Tim Hortons coffee if I got a raise, right? If my income went up, my ability is increasing. Um, so for most of us, for normal goods, which would be pretty much most goods, theater tickets and restaurant meals and groceries and gas in the car and all of those things, we will see an increase in demand if income increases, right? If we make more money, we buy more of those things. Um, there is also a classification of goods called inferior goods that we buy less of if income goes up. So certain things like bus tickets or craft dinner, or ramen noodles, those are things that we buy less of when we make more money. Like those are types of goods that we sort of survive on. But as we start earning more and more money, we buy less of those inferior goods and more of the normal goods. So depending on the product that we're talking about, we'll see increases or decreases in demand based on the amount of money that we're making. We can also think about what's happening in other markets when we think about related goods. So for my example, Tim Hortons coffee, and this center demand curve will be our original demand curve. Maybe I will buy less Tim Hortons coffee. My demand will decrease if the price of McDonald's coffee goes down or Starbucks coffee goes down, right? That will decrease my demand for Tim Hortons coffee because I'm going to start buying more of those substitutes instead of Tim Hortons, right? Um, and this can work in the opposite direction as well. We have goods that we call complements. So instead of Tim Hortons coffee, this could be the demand curve for hot dog buns. Well, the demand for hot dog buns, let's get rid of that arrow. The demand for hot dog buns will fluctuate depending on the price of hot dogs, right? So even if the price of hot dog buns is not changing at all, we still may buy more or less. If hot dogs go on sale, then we will buy more hot dog buns. The demand will shift to the right. If hot dogs start getting really expensive for some reason, then we will buy less hot dog buns. So those are complements, and they move and they move opposite to the price change in the related good. So what's going on with my income? What options do I have, and what's happening in those other markets? That will affect demand. We have this one category that we just call tastes and preferences, which is just a huge catch-all category for all of those things that make a good more or less popular. Fashion comes and goes, right? So bell-bottom jeans are increasing in demand, and then they're decreasing in demand just because the times are changing. Um, Sometimes news will come out. We'll find out that a product is good for you, like eggs, for example. Eggs. First, we thought they were unhealthy, so we saw demand decrease. The research comes out and says eggs are bad for your cholesterol, and then more research comes out and says eggs are really good for your cholesterol, or just a certain type of cholesterol, but they're actually really good for you. So demand increases, and then it goes back down again, right? So eggs have had a rough ride, but the key is that as new information becomes available, our preferences and tastes change because now we know more. So suddenly we find out that almonds and avocados are very healthy, and therefore we see an increase in demand for almonds and avocados. Um, and so forth. Any of these trends, any of these things as they come and go, sometimes our feelings about a good will just change over time. A couple more expectations of future prices. So this speaks to the idea that we we think to ourselves of what something may cost in the future. So if this is our demand curve for housing, for example, if we think that the price of housing is going up, that may increase demand because we want to buy it now, right? I want to buy the house today when it's $500,000, so I don't have to wait a year and risk that it will be $600,000. So if I think price is going to go up in the future, we'll see an increase in demand right now because people don't want to miss the boat, is the term. Or what's more true today, people generally think housing prices are going to go down. So today we actually see a decrease in demand because people are holding back. They don't want to buy right away. So the quantity of houses demanded at any given price is actually less right now. It's lower just because people think that if they wait longer, they can get a house for cheaper than it is today. Right. So what do we think the market's going to do in the future? And then finally, there's just the number of buyers, right? So in my market up here with Tim Hortons Coffee, we had 3 buyers. Well, what if we doubled the size of our economy? What if all 3 of us, I'll have to divorce my wife for this, but what if all 3 of us got married to other people and now the market is actually 6 people? Well, we would expect that instead of 1 unit, now it's 2, right? Instead of 3 units, now it's 4 or 5. So we'll see an increase in demand as the population grows, at least from the point of view of the market, right? And this is true for demographics too. So think of like the baby boom. The boomers are going through time, and as they're getting older, their needs change, right? So right now, all of the baby boomers are approaching retirement. So it's completely reasonable to think that as more people are elderly, we'll see an increase in demand for things like rockers, rocking chairs, and canes, and the things that older people need. So this, taken together, this is the demand side of the market. We have a downward sloping demand curve. It may shift depending on the different determinants, what's happening in the marketplace. And regardless of where it is, as price goes up and down, here I should label these, price and quantity. As price is going up and down, we will see movements along the curve to new positions. Whether the curve is here or here or here. Right? It's always true that when you adjust the price, you see a change in quantity demanded, which means a movement along the curve. And if anything other than price changes, then we see a shift of the entire curve itself. So that's the first half. That's demand. So if we understand demand, then we have what we need to actually understand supply. The nice thing is that supply basically follows all of the same rules, just for different reasons, and it operates in kind of a mirrored way. So on the supply side of the market, how do we define supply? Well, it's a willingness to put a product on the market, or in the factors market, a willingness to supply labor, and the ability to do that. I may want to supply the market with mega yachts, but I don't really have the ability. That's a pretty big infrastructure. But maybe I want to supply the market with haircuts. Well, I can do that. I have the ability. Not really, but just saying, right? So if I have the willingness and ability to supply a good or a service, that means I can put it on the market. And the amount of that good or service that I'm willing and able to produce will also fluctuate with the price. Now, we're not going to get too into it yet. When we get into some chapters ahead, we'll talk about cost of production. We'll look at detailed reasons why the supply curve does what it does. But for now, let's just use this idea that the supply curve will be upward sloping. And what we mean is that as the price is increasing, basically I become more and more willing and able to supply greater quantities of that good on the marketplace. Like I say, there's detailed reasons for this that we won't talk about just yet. But for now, we can just think about it as firms chasing profit or firms chasing money. Obviously, if the price is increasing, then there's going to be more money in it, which means I'll devote more resources to making that good or that service, and therefore there's going to be a greater quantity supplied in the marketplace. That will be suitable for now. We can just leave it there. Um, but the law of supply will be also in effect, which means that as the price goes down, then the quantity supplied will go down with it, right? Price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. So you can see the pattern, right? These changes in price will cause movements along the supply curve. The supply curve will also shift in the same way as the demand curve shifted. We can see a decrease in total supply. We could see an increase in total supply. And this is not based on what's happening with the price. This is based on something else. This is what we call the determinants of supply. So our determinants of demand were these things. Our determinants of supply are similar but different. The firm, in this case, we're using production goods. So the firm has to think about things like input prices. How much am I paying? So if I'm making a good or a service, so if I'm Tim Hortons and the price of coffee is $2 and I can supply this many coffees, well, that's assuming that the input prices stay the same. If it starts costing me more for the coffee beans and the labor and and my hydro goes up, which is electricity in Ontario, if all of those costs are rising, then I can't supply the same quantity for that amount. So the supply will have to decrease, right? Or vice versa. If things start suddenly becoming cheaper, then yeah, maybe the supply will increase. So the firm is sensitive to those input costs, right? Oops. The firm is also sensitive to changes in technology. If we find newer and better ways of putting together those outputs, those final products, then that means that we can supply a greater amount than we could before, even at the same price. So my $2 coffee cup here, if all of a sudden, the Tim Hortons finds a way that the new AI Tesla robot can replace the staff behind the counter, which saves them, $1 million a year. Well, that's great. That means we can put out more coffees for cheaper. So at a price of $2 a cup, we'll make more than we did before. Right? The firm is sensitive to expectations of future prices. The firm will be considering that the price may go up or down in the future, and that will change their willingness to come to market today. Right? If 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 I'm in the market for a house, then my willingness and ability, if I think the price is going to go up, then I will wait. Right? And the firm is kind of in the same position. If the firm thinks the price is going to go up in the future, well then they're going to wait too. They're not going to rush to build that house. They'll say to themselves, well, I've got all these materials. Why don't I just hang on to them for 6 months or so, and then I'll build the house when I can sell it for even more, right? So both firms and households are thinking in the same way. They're holding back when they think sorry, it's the opposite. A firm will hold back if they think the price is going up, and a household will increase their demand if they think that the price is going to go up, and then vice versa. If we think the price is going to go down, households will hold back, but firms will rush to bring their products to market to get the money while they can. So supply will increase. Um, the number of suppliers obviously is going to impact the market supply. If 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 three more companies just like Tim Hortons all open up, well then that means we're going to see more coffee, right? So the supply increases. There's just now more coffee cups at $2 a cup than there were before. Why? Because we have more people doing it. So that's pretty straightforward. As firms open and close, we're going to see increases and decreases in market supply. And then there's the prices of related products too. So an example may be a car manufacturer. they have to choose how they're going to allocate their resources, and they make trucks, they make cars, and they make motorcycles, and so on. So if the price of motorcycles is going up, then the supply of cars may go down because those firms are going to reallocate those resources. They're going to shift on the production's possibilities curve. They're going to go from here's cars and here's motorcycles and here's our production's possibilities. Well, if suddenly motorcycles are more profitable, then we're going to see a movement along that curve, which means they're trading off and making less cars than before. So therefore, there's a decrease in supply. Right. So the functioning is kind of the same. You have an upward sloping supply curve that shifts to the right or to the left, depending on these determinants, right? And then we are also sensitive to price. As price goes up and down, the quantity supplied will increase or decrease, which means that we are moving along this curve up and down, regardless of where the curve is. Wherever the curve is, as the price changes, we move up and down along it. So those are our two forces. We have on the one in the consumption market, on the demand side, we have households who are demanding groceries and restaurant meals and vacations and all the things that they want. And then on the supply side, you have firms who are willing and able to provide it. And both sides of the equation are sensitive to the price in terms of the quantity that they're going to demand or supply. And both the demand and the supply may shift depending on what's happening in the world. Right? So those are the forces. Now, if we understand that, this will take us into the next step. We want to bring those forces together and look at them on the same graph. I want to overlay my supply curve and my demand curve. So here is a supply and demand schedule for ice cream. And in this model here, the price actually is increasing as we move down the model. So we start off at a price of free, and then we just think of the two forces. The quantity demanded, and these are just kind of some made up numbers, but if the price is zero, then the quantity demanded may be 19,000 units, right? That's just a made up number. It's a small town, right? But that's the most ice cream that anybody's going to eat. 19,000 units. If they're giving it away for free, then we all eat ice cream until we can't eat anymore. And that's what that number is going to represent, right? But if the price in the market is zero, then that means that firms are probably going to supply a quantity of zero because firms just aren't going to be willing and able to supply that good if they can't get any revenue for it, right? So pretty straightforward. And then let's attach a price to it. Let's say, okay, 50 cents is going to be the price of ice cream. Well, we will see a reduction in the quantity demanded. Some people were only in it for a free ice cream, so we go from 19,000 units to 16,000. And here we're just going to say firms still aren't going to produce any because 50 cents a cone is just not going to be enough, right? It doesn't even cover the costs. Okay, so let's make the cost of ice cream $1. Once again, a decrease in quantity demanded. And maybe now a firm is actually interested in supplying a small amount of ice cream to the marketplace. At $1, there's a tiny bit of profit to be made. So maybe we will devote some resources to making ice cream, and we will supply 1,000 units. And this pattern just continues. $1.50, decrease in quantity demanded, increase in quantity supplied. Right. $2, another decrease in quantity demanded, and increase in quantity supplied, all the way down. And at this higher price, the quantity demanded is quite low and the quantity supplied is quite high. So we see the law of demand in effect and we see the law of supply in effect. And what's interesting here is if you think about it as one elevator going down and one elevator going up, as that's happening, at some point they have to meet, right? Here, this is occurring at this $2 price. At $2, we find an agreement. The market is the households and the firms are in agreement with one another that at a price of $2, a quantity demanded of 7,000 will match to a quantity supplied of 7,000, and this is just where those two elevators cross paths, right? So this is what we call an equilibrium. We have some balance in the marketplace. The quantity supplied matches to the quantity demanded, and both sides are in agreement on the price. And if we were to graph that, what we've done is laid over a demand curve and a supply curve, and we've just found that intersection point. This is where those two curves intersect. And again, in our situation here, that's happening at a price of $2. So we have an equilibrium price, and we have a quantity of 7,000 units. We have an equilibrium quantity. So the center point is called the equilibrium, and it reflects an agreement on both axes, an agreement on price, an agreement on quantity, and the market is now nicely balanced. So what we'll see then is that in this free market system, in our circular flow model, the forces of supply and demand will actually push the market into this equilibrium kind of all on its own. And we'll demonstrate how that works. But this is something that we call the law of supply and demand. The price of any good or service is going to adjust up and down until the market is in equilibrium. And we call this the invisible hand of the markets. This was something that I can't remember if it was Adam Smith or Keynes that said it, but two very famous economists who developed a lot of this theory. Basically, the equilibrium will happen. It occurs, and there's a reason for that we can demonstrate. So ultimately, the market is going to find a price, and it's going to find the right quantity to produce. So how could that possibly happen? Well, it happens because we can look at what happens if the market is out of equilibrium. If the price is too high, then what's going to happen is that there's going to be a surplus on the market. A surplus is when you have too much of something, right? If the price is over the equilibrium price, then that means that the quantity supplied will be quite high and the quantity demanded will be quite low, right? And that means there's going to be a lot of excess production. There's a lot of this good being produced and not a very large quantity being demanded. So in the one hand, we're making all these goods and putting them on the shelves, but then nobody is buying them, right? And what will happen in this circumstance is that we will see pressure on the price to go down. The only way to resolve this surplus is to decrease the price and move back into equilibrium. So here, I've set the price at a very high level, 250 is higher than equilibrium, and this is the quantity demanded on the demand curve at 4,000 units, and this is the quantity supplied on the supply curve at 10,000 units. So we have a surplus. We have 10,000 units on the market and only 4,000 units being purchased at that price. So I have 6,000 extra units that are not selling. Well, in that situation, firms would rather have something than nothing. So what will happen is that the price will need to drop, and firms will lower the price of that good in order to sell off all of that inventory. And as that's occurring, as the price is going down, that means they're also going to be reducing the quantity supplied and ultimately wind up back in this equilibrium, right? So too high of a price just means that you're making too many goods. People aren't buying them. Your options are to hold clearance sales and just get that inventory out and reduce your production, right? So produce less goods. Don't produce 10,000. Produce 7,000, right? And don't charge $2.50. Charge $2, and then that will bring us back into balance. So there's this force. There's this pressure pushing down on the price if it's too high. And as that's happening, the quantity is adjusting at the same time. So we're allocating the right amount of resources. On the flip side of that, you have what occurs when the price is too low. And it's just the opposite of a surplus. In a surplus, we had too much of the good. Here, if the price is too low, we're going to have a shortage of the good. The price is lower than equilibrium, which basically means that at a very low price, our laws will say that at a low price, the quantity demanded is quite high, but the quantity supplied is quite low. So only so many of these products are being made, but everybody wants one, right? So in this case, the opposite thing happens. It's the buyers that have to compete on the price now. And you see this sometimes at Christmas time when there's a shortage of the most popular toy, right? And all of a sudden, the auctions like eBay, everybody is bidding up higher and higher prices to get the available goods. People are just willing to pay more. So the price then, the pressure on that price is up. Buyers are competing for what's available, and if this price is too low, so here we'll set the equilibrium is $2. So we'll set the actual price at $1.50. That's what they're selling for. Well, the quantity being supplied will be 4,000 units, and the quantity being demanded will be 10,000 units. Well, that's a problem. We're short 6,000 units, right? This is what the market wants, and this is what the market is getting, right? So now people are bidding up the price. So we're willing to pay more than $1.50. Just give me one of the available ice cream cones or whatever it may be. So as this price is getting bid up, then firms are seeing this and beginning to produce greater quantities of that good, once again bringing us back into equilibrium. So this upwards pressure on the price. So if the price is too low, there's an upwards pressure. If the price is too high, there's a downwards pressure. And as the price is moving back to the equilibrium price, then we see changes in the quantity supplied and demanded, which move it back into the equilibrium quantity. So this is pretty cool. What's happening, what we're saying is that the market will actually self-adjust to provide just the right amount of the good at a price that everybody is in agreement with, right? And if we are producing too much of the good, then the price will have to come down. And if we're producing too little of the good, then the price will have to go up. So at the end of the day, the market actually gets what the market wants. We're not wasting resources on goods and services that are unsold, and we're not shorting the market either by not producing enough of the good so that the people who are willing and able to buy it don't have it available. So that's the essential supply and demand. So we've seen the two sides of the model and how they function. Demand is doing its thing, and then supply is doing its thing. And once again, we'll do price and quantity there and there. And it really is as simple as just bringing those curves together, which means I have a downward sloping curve and an upward sloping curve, and that has to form an X. So in the center of that X is going to be an agreed equilibrium price and an agreed equilibrium quantity. And if the price is too high or too low, then we see it self-adjust back to that equilibrium through shortage and surplus. So pretty cool. This is how our market allocates resources. This is how we know the right amount of Coca-Cola to produce and the right price to charge. This is how we know how much your vacation will be or how much your airfare will be if you fly across the country and how many times that jet will go across the country. It's all based on supply and demand. And if price is too high or too low, the market will fix it. So that's essentially it. The only other thing we really need to consider then is these shifts, these changes. So the world changes all the time. People's incomes are going up and down. Goods are getting more and less expensive. Popularity changes. People want things more or less than they did before. And how we think about the future is changing. Populations are changing, and it's true on both sides. For the firms, sometimes they have to pay more or less for inputs. They may be choosing to produce more or less of some other good. Technology is improving, and the number of sellers changes, and firms are thinking about future prices too. So all of these things are coming together, meaning that either one of these or both of these curves may be shifting or changing at any given point in time. And we can see, using just what we've already looked at, what happens when that occurs. So here, this is an increase in demand. So the two blue lines were our original equilibrium, and we're back to ice cream, $2 and 7,000 units. So here's our ice cream equilibrium. But then something happened. The market changed and demand increased, right? Why did it increase? Well, it could have been for any number of reasons. Maybe maybe tastes and preferences changed because it got hotter outside, right? Maybe the population grew. Maybe the government just gave a big rebate and consumer income went up. For whatever reason, demand is increasing for ice cream cones. And when the demand increases, that also means that the equilibrium has to change as well. The center of the X is different from where it was before. This price of $2 is no longer sufficient for the new market. When demand went up, if we kept the price at $2, then the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded is now in a shortage position. So that means that there will be pressure on the price to increase, and we will see this new higher price of $2.50, and we will also see a new higher quantity at equilibrium of 10,000 units. So this increase in demand also causes an increase in equilibrium price and an increase in equilibrium quantity. And the market will adjust to that because otherwise we would have a shortage, right? So understanding that is critical to understanding how supply and demand works. So I have draw 4 different supply and demand models here, right? And we can look at what would happen. Here, demand increases, right? We've shifted it to the right. Well, that means that the equilibrium is now here. The price is higher, and the quantity is also increased. I will shift demand to the left, right? Something became unpopular. We found out this product causes cancer. So therefore, people want less of it. Well, the equilibrium is now here at a lower price with less quantity demanded than before. I can shift supply. Technology improves. So I'll move the supply curve to the right. Well, that's really great because the new equilibrium means that the product will be at a lower price and a higher quantity than we've seen in the past. And finally, I could decrease supply. Maybe those input prices are going up. It's wages just increased and gas costs more money. So therefore, the new equilibrium will be at a higher price and a lower quantity. So the market is always adjusting as these things change. The equilibrium point, equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, is changing along with it. And that's the key to understanding supply and demand. So why do gas prices go up and down? Well, it's because the supply might be increasing or decreasing, right? Or it's because demand is increasing or decreasing. And that means more or less fuel is being traded and the price is adjusting to the new equilibrium. And we just see it happening in real time. In certain markets, we can watch this happening second by second. The prices of stocks go up and down second by second. The price of commodities like corn and soybeans, you can watch the you can watch the price go up and down as supply and demand changes moment to moment. Um, in other things, we see it happening more in slow motion, where the price of restaurant meals has certainly risen over the past 2 years, but we don't look at the menu and your steak is $40 and now it's 42 and now it's 39. It doesn't happen that fast. because there's reasons. There's things like we call prices can be a bit sticky due to things like menu costs, which is like the cost of actually changing a price, so on. But this is what is happening. So restaurants face higher costs to make the good. They're passing those costs along. As they're facing higher costs, that means that supply is decreasing, and that means that the price of those meals is going up. So that's the essential supply and demand. The only other thing we would really need to think about is that it's usually like if we're just moving one of these curves, then we know what's going to happen to price and quantity, right? But if we're shifting both of the curves, then we can't be quite as specific. And maybe this is something we should talk about in a drop-in session because it's really hard to sort of to draw or write. But when we're talking about changes in equilibrium, the questions we need to ask ourselves is, okay, so if something is changing, first of all, what is it that's changing? If it's the price that's changing, then that means we are shifting to a new position along the curve, and that's all we're doing, right? Price is going down, so the quantity demanded is increasing, right? Price is going down, which means that the quantity supplied is decreasing, right? So if price is changing, the curves don't move at all. They stay exactly where they are. But if anything else is changing, then one or both of these curves are shifting, and we have to find where that new equilibrium will be. And then we just ask ourselves, where is that new equilibrium? Is it at a higher or lower price than before? And is the quantity being traded higher or lower than before? That's the key to understanding it. So again, I do encourage you to take some time with this. I've just gone through it in about an hour. We have 2 weeks for this, so go through it step by step. There's some posted practice questions. There's some drop-in sessions. Again, really make sure that you have a good understanding of this because the rest of the course is going to be building upon this. So I'm here to help make sure that you do have a good grasp. Email me any questions you may have, and I'll look at getting up some more practice exercises too. So other than that, I hope this has been useful, and I will look forward to seeing you in the drop-in. Thanks, guys.